Assalamualaikum and hi my lovely student. So this is 6 chapter 2 matrices form 5 KSSM. So how to determine the inverse matrix for a 2 by 2 matrix? Given matrix A, I'm gonna use laser pointer. So given matrix A, this is matrix A. Inverse matrix, so this is the inverse matrix of A, can be obtained using the formula as follows. The inverse matrix of A equals to 1 over AD minus BC. So that means AD minus BC. B times C over, multiplied with, look at the location or position of A and D. Just change the position of A and D, and B just put negative. Also the element of C just put at negative sign in front of the element, where AD minus BC not equals to 0. If AD minus BC equals to 0, then we can conclude that the inverse matrix of A not exist. So determinant of matrix A, so this is how we write a determinant of A, is AD minus BC, where AD minus BC not equals to 0. Therefore, inverse matrix, as I said just now, the inverse of A exists. If AD minus BC equals to 0, then the inverse matrix does not exist. So have a look at example 23. For each of the following matrices, determine whether the inverse matrix exists. If yes, calculate the inverse matrix. In order to determine whether the inverse matrix exists or not, remember AB minus DC must be not equals to 0. Sorry, just now AD minus BC. Sorry. AD minus BC. Okay. So have a look at example A. So this is, remember, this is A, B, C, D. So AD is 1 times 8 minus BC is 2 times 4. 8 minus 8 is equals to 0. So the determinant of A equals to 0, hence inverse of A does not exist. So for example B, this is example B. Alright, first calculate AD minus BC first. When we calculate AD minus BC, we'll get 2. 2 is not equals to 0. Hence, the inverse of B exists. When the inverse of B exists, we can calculate and we can find the inverse matrix. So the inverse of B matrix, the inverse of matrix B, so we just use the formula just now. Okay, this formula 1 over AD minus BC, and then multiply with this matrix. So 1 over AD minus BC. Okay, have a look at this. We must change the position of 3 and 4. Position of A and D here. And the element of B and C, we need to add negative sign in front of the element. So just multiply these two. So just now we get here is 2. So 1 over 2 multiplied with this matrix, you will get this matrix. 1 over 2 times 4 is 2. 1 over 2 times negative 5 is negative 5 over 2, and so on. So this is the inverse matrix B. Okay, have a look at example 24. Given that matrix C is this, calculate the inverse matrix of C. So this is the solution. Let's use the formula 1 over AD minus BC. So remember, this is A, B, C, and D. So A times D minus B times C. So this one, change the position of A and D. So this is the element of D. This is the element of A. So for the B and C, we just add negative in front of a negative sign in front of the element. So B is negative 6. Negative, when we put negative, so negative 6 become positive. So this is positive 1, so become negative 1. So AD minus BC is equals to 2. So next, you just multiply 1 over 2 with this matrix, you will get this matrix. So this is the inverse matrix of C. So given that matrix D, so this is matrix D, calculate the value of M is if A, matrix D does not have inverse matrix. So remember just now, if the matrix does not have inverse matrix, that means AD minus BC is equals to 0. If AD minus BC is not equals to 0, then the matrix have an inverse matrix. Okay, but here said that matrix D does not have inverse matrix. So for sure, AD minus BC equals to 0. So AD is negative 2 times M, which is negative 2M, minus negative 6 times 1 equals to 0. So we will get the value of M. So for question B, given that the inverse matrix of D is this, so how to determine the value of M? So this is the solution for B. When matrix and with its inverse, we will get identity matrix. So this is matrix D, and this is the inverse matrix of D. So we just multiply both matrices and equals to I. I is an identity matrix. So you just multiply these two matrices, and then you will get the value of M. Alright. Next, example 26. It is given that a matrix times with A is equals to identity matrix, and matrix A has an order of 2 by 2. Calculate matrix A. So we know that this is actually the inverse matrix of A, because when an inverse multiply with the matrix, we will get identity matrix. As you can see, this is identity matrix. So since the product of 1, 2, 3, 8 with A is an identity matrix, as I mentioned just now, hence A is an inverse matrix of this. So we just calculate the inverse matrix using the formula 1 over AD minus BC. Don't forget to change the position of A and D, and also put negative sign in front of the element B and C. So this is the inverse matrix of A. So that's all. This is your homework, self-practice 2.2F. All have 4 questions together. So thank you and see you in the next video.